The storm outside rattled the glass walls of the penthouse, a restless growl of thunder chasing itself across the night sky. Lightning flickered, and for a moment my reflection in the window stared back at me like a stranger. Cold eyes, flawless makeup, a silk dress too polished for comfort. It was the face of a woman I hardly recognized, or rather, the face of the Villainess. I still couldn't wrap my head around it. One day I was just me. And the next, I woke up inside a story that wasn't mine, married to the kind of man women in glossy magazines called untouchable, Ryan Carter, my husband, the brooding CEO hero. The problem? In this twisted script, I wasn't the heroine, I was the sharp-tongued, conniving wife who would eventually be thrown aside for his true love. If fate thought I'd go down that predictably, it clearly underestimated me. I lifted my wine glass, watching the crimson swirl like spilled secrets. "Bravo, Claire," I whispered to my own reflection. "You've officially become the woman everyone loves to hate." The sound of the front door opening snapped me out of my thoughts. Heavy footsteps echoed through the penthouse, deliberate and unhurried. A moment later, Ryan appeared, tall and impossibly composed, despite the rain plastering his dark hair to his forehead. His suit clung to him, damp at the shoulders, tie loosened just enough to suggest exhaustion, but never carelessness. He didn't look at me right away. He rarely did. He crossed the room with that same restrained elegance, shrugging off his jacket, until his eyes finally flicked to mine. For the briefest second, something unreadable crossed his gaze. Then, without a word, he walked over and draped the jacket across my shoulders. I froze, caught between surprise and a flutter of something far more dangerous. His jacket was warm despite the rain, smelling faintly of cedar and crisp winter air. "You'll catch a cold," he muttered, almost like an afterthought, as though he regretted the kindness as soon as it escaped him. I arched a brow, masking the warmth stirring in my chest. "Did you just show concern?" "Careful, Ryan. If anyone hears about this, your reputation for icy indifference will be ruined." The corner of his mouth twitched. Not quite a smile, more like a secret he refused to share. "Don't read into it." But of course I did. Because how could I not? Silence stretched between us, weighted by all the words we never said. I hated it, the way he could look right through me, as if I were just another contract to sign and file away. Maybe that was why my next words tumbled out recklessly, almost a dare. "You're supposed to hate me, you know." That got his attention. His brows drew together, his gaze suddenly sharper. "Supposed to?" he repeated slowly, like the phrase carried more weight than it should. My heart stumbled. I forced a smirk, swirling the wine in my glass to cover the tremor in my voice. "Don't act so shocked. I make it very difficult to ignore me, don't I?" He studied me for a moment longer, then gave a soft, humorless chuckle. "You certainly do." And just like that, he walked past me, loosening his cufflinks, disappearing down the hall without another glance. The jacket on my shoulders suddenly felt heavier than silk ever should. I set my glass down and leaned back against the cold window. Fine. If this was the role fate had written for me, then I would play it on my own terms. Not as the disposable villainess, but as someone unforgettable. I wasn't going to wait quietly for the story to crush me. If Ryan thought he knew how this tale would unfold, he was about to discover just how dangerous it could be to underestimate the villain in designer heels. And if somewhere between all the storms and broken scripts, I found myself wanting him to look at me, not with suspicion, but with something softer. Well, that would be my little secret. For now. The next morning, I decided I was done being invisible. If I was destined to play the Villainess, then I'd play her spectacularly. Not the quiet, disposable kind of villain. No, I was going to be the kind that hijacked every scene, leaving even the so-called heroine scrambling in my shadow. Which is how I ended up standing outside Ryan's executive boardroom in 4-inch heels and a dress designed to make Wall Street tremble. The double doors loomed before me, polished and severe, guarded by two assistants who looked like they'd rather wrestle a tiger than let me through. "You can't just barge in there, Mrs. Carter," one of them stammered, eyes wide. I smiled sweetly, tilting my head. "Oh, darling, I don't barge. I make an entrance." And before they could stop me, I pushed open the doors. The room went still. 12 board members froze mid-sentence, their suits stiff with disapproval. At the head of the table sat Ryan, immaculate as always, his jaw tightening the moment his eyes locked on mine. For a heartbeat, no one breathed. Then I crossed the room, the sharp click of my heels echoing like a drum roll. I didn't stop until I reached Ryan's chair, leaning casually against the table as if I'd been invited. "Good morning, gentlemen," I purred, drawing out the silence until one of them shifted uncomfortably. "And good morning to you, my darling husband." The faintest twitch pulled at Ryan's mouth, half irritation, half something else he'd never admit to. "Claire," he said slowly, his voice like steel wrapped in velvet. "What are you doing here?" "I thought I'd offer some wifely support." I flicked my gaze to the mountain of charts and contracts sprawled across the table. After all, what's marriage without a little partnership? A few of the board members coughed awkwardly. One man actually dropped his pen. Ryan's fingers curled around the armrest, knuckles pale, but he didn't stop me, which was all the invitation I needed. I slid into the empty seat beside him, smoothing my skirt as though I belonged there. "So," I said brightly, "which of these numbers is supposed to impress me?" The room erupted into muffled shock. Ryan's eyes burned into mine, warning me, challenging me, daring me to continue. And God help me I did, because for the first time since waking up in this ridiculous story, I felt powerful. By the time the meeting ended, Ryan was simmering with restrained fury. He said nothing as we left the boardroom, but the set of his jaw promised a storm. I followed him into the private elevator, feeling the tension crackle in the confined space. The doors closed, and finally he turned on me. "What was that?" I shrugged, pretending innocence. "You're welcome." The presentation was dragging. Someone had to liven things up. "You humiliated them," he snapped. His voice was low, controlled, but his eyes, God, those eyes were ablaze. "Please," I drawled, meeting his glare without flinching. "They'll survive. Besides, no one ever forgets the woman bold enough to sit at the CEO's right hand." Something shifted in his expression. Annoyance, yes, but under it, a flicker of reluctant admiration. He tried to hide it, but I saw. And maybe that was why my heart stuttered, traitorous and uninvited. The elevator chimed, saving us both from saying more. That night, the Carter Foundation Gala glittered like a scene ripped straight from a fairy tale. Crystal chandeliers dripped light over the ballroom, gowns shimmered like rivers of jewels, and whispers swirled like perfume in the air. I descended the marble staircase at Ryan's side, his arm firm beneath my hand. Cameras flashed, hungry and relentless. For once, I didn't shy away. I tilted my chin, letting the world drink me in. The whispers followed immediately. "There she is, the wicked wife. She looks stunning. But doesn't she always? Poor Ryan trapped with her." I heard the sweet young intern. I silenced them with a single smile, the kind of smile that could cut glass. Halfway through the evening, as I pretended to admire the silent auction items, I caught Ryan watching me from across the room. His gaze was unreadable, but heavy enough to steal the air from my lungs. When he finally crossed the ballroom to join me, the crowd parted as though he carried gravity itself. "You're enjoying yourself," he murmured, standing too close, his cologne mingling with the scent of champagne. "Immensely," I replied, sipping from my glass. "I think I might even be winning them over." His mouth curved, barely, but enough to send a dangerous thrill through me. Or scandalizing them further? I leaned closer, my lips grazing the rim of my glass. "Isn't that the same thing?" For a moment, the noise of the gala faded. It was just the two of us, standing in a fragile bubble of heat and tension. His hand brushed mine. So lightly I almost thought I imagined it. Almost. And then, "Ryan!" a voice rang out, sharp and sweet at once. I turned just in time to see her, the heroine, the one this story was written for. She glided toward us in pastel silk, her smile innocent, her eyes shimmering with the kind of purity I could never mimic. The crowd's whispers shifted instantly, electric with anticipation, and just like that, the bubble shattered. I forced a smile, though my chest ached with something I refused to name. Well, if fate thought I would bow out quietly, it had another thing coming. Because this villainess wasn't planning on surrendering the stage. Not tonight, not ever. The heroine's arrival was like a spark tossed into dry tinder. The ballroom shifted instantly, whispers spreading in a wave, eyes darting between her and Ryan as though waiting for destiny to snap its fingers. She looked perfect, of course, soft curls brushing her shoulders, lips painted with innocence, a pastel dress that whispered gentle and pure. She was everything I wasn't, and the story said she would be the one to melt Ryan's frozen heart. I felt my smile tighten, the corners sharp as glass. "Ryan," she breathed, touching his arm with delicate familiarity. "It's been so long." He inclined his head politely, but I noticed the way his gaze slid back to me, as if tethered by something he couldn't shake. I refused to let the heroine see that. I slipped my arm more firmly through his, pressing my palm against his sleeve, my nails grazing the fabric just enough to claim him. "Darling," I said sweetly, "aren't you going to introduce me?" The heroine's eyes flicked to mine, widening slightly. She hadn't expected me to fight. Villainesses never did. We were supposed to cling, claw, then crumble. Ryan's voice was steady, almost clipped. "Claire, this is Emily. We worked together years ago." "Worked?" I repeated with a slow nod, as if tasting the word. "How quaint." Emily's cheeks flushed, but her smile didn't falter. "Ryan and I used to spend so many late nights on projects. He was always so driven." She laughed softly, eyes shimmering like she was replaying some golden memory. The crowd leaned in, hungry for drama. I tilted my head, returning her smile with something razor thin. "Yes, well, he still keeps late nights. Only now, he has me to keep him company." A ripple of laughter escaped the onlookers, quickly hushed. Emily blinked, her composure faltering just enough to satisfy the petty part of me. But then Ryan surprised me. He placed his hand over mine, grounding me. "That's enough," he murmured, his voice pitched only for me. The warmth of his palm seeped into my skin, unraveling me in ways I wasn't ready for. I wanted to snap back, to play the villainous role I'd promised myself I'd perfect. Instead, I looked up at him and whispered, "Is it?" Because I wasn't sure anymore. The gala blurred after that, champagne toasts and glittering smiles spinning together until I felt dizzy. I found myself on the balcony later, the night air sharp against my skin, the city sprawling below like a sea of fallen stars. I didn't hear him until the glass door slid open. "You vanished," Ryan said simply. "I thought I'd give the crowd a break," I replied, resting my hands on the cold railing. Too much villainess in one night can be exhausting. He stepped closer, his presence wrapping around me even though he hadn't touched me yet. "Is that what you think you are?" I let out a short laugh. "Isn't that what everyone thinks? The conniving wife standing in the way of destiny?" My throat tightened, but I pushed the words out anyway. "Don't worry. I know how this story ends. I'm supposed to lose. I'll fight and scheme and embarrass myself until eventually you leave me for her." Ryan was silent for a long moment. So long I almost regretted saying anything at all. Then his voice came, low and rough. "Claire, do you really believe that's what I want?" I turned, startled, and found him closer than I'd realized. His eyes weren't cold this time. They burned, but not with anger. With something more dangerous. Something I hadn't dared hope for. "I don't know what you want," I admitted, my voice softer now, unguarded. "I don't even know if you know." He exhaled, a sound caught between frustration and surrender. His hand came up, brushing a strand of hair from my cheek with such tenderness, it made my chest ache. "I know one thing," he said. "I don't want a story someone else wrote for me. And I don't want a heroine who exists only on paper." His fingers lingered, tracing the line of my jaw. "I want you, with all your chaos, with all your fire, even when you drive me insane." For once, I couldn't find my sharp tongue. My throat closed, my heart hammering so loudly I was sure he could hear it. "You'll regret saying that," I whispered, half laughing, half breaking. "Try me," he murmured, and before I could protest, his lips were on mine. The kiss was nothing like I expected. It wasn't cold or careful, but fierce, consuming, as though 2 years of silence had broken at once. I melted into it, my hands clutching at his lapels, his arms wrapping around me like he'd been starving for this as much as I had. When we finally broke apart, I was breathless, my lipstick smudged, my carefully built defenses crumbling to dust. "So much for the villainess," I managed, still trembling. Ryan's forehead rested against mine, his voice barely above a whisper. "No, you were never the villainess, Claire. You were just the only one bold enough to steal the story." And in that moment, under the sweep of the city lights, I realized he was right. Maybe I had been written as the woman destined to lose. But somewhere between the fights, the scandals, and the stolen glances, I had rewritten everything. This wasn't the story of the sweet little heroine and the untouchable CEO. This was our story. And for once, it was finally mine to keep.